The streets of Washington were alive with the hum of city life.
The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the pavement.
Elon Musk, dressed in a simple yet elegant black jacket and jeans, walked briskly down the sidewalk. His security detail, a pair of tall, broad-shouldered men in dark suits, followed a few steps behind, their eyes scanning the surroundings with practiced precision. Elon had just finished a meeting at a local tech hub and decided to take a stroll before heading back to his hotel. He enjoyed these moments of anonymity, rare as they were, where he could blend into the rhythm of everyday life. As he turned a corner, his attention was drawn to a figure sitting on the edge of the sidewalk, leaning against the brick wall of a closed bookstore. The man was disheveled, his clothes worn and frayed, his face etched with the lines of hardship. A crumpled cardboard sign rested at his feet, the words "Anything Helps" scrawled in shaky handwriting. Elon slowed his pace, his gaze lingering on the man. There was something about him, a quiet dignity, perhaps, or the way his eyes seemed to carry a story too heavy to tell. The man looked up, his eyes meeting Elon's. For a moment, neither of them spoke.
Then, the man broke the silence.
"Spare some change, sir? Just enough to get something to eat." Elon hesitated. He wasn't one to give handouts casually. His philosophy was rooted in solving systemic problems, not just alleviating symptoms. But something about this man's voice, the way it trembled with both pride and desperation, struck a chord. He glanced at his security team, who stood a respectful distance away, then back at the man. "Come with me," Elon said, his voice calm but firm. "I'll buy you a meal."
The man's eyes widened in surprise.
He looked around, as if expecting someone to jump out and tell him this was a joke. When no one did, he slowly pushed himself to his feet, wincing slightly as he straightened his back. "You're serious?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Elon nodded. "There's a restaurant around the corner. Let's go." The man hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Thank you, sir, thank you." The two men walked side by side, Elon's security trailing discreetly behind. The restaurant was a modest place, not too fancy but clean and welcoming. The hostess recognized Elon immediately, her eyes widening in shock, but she quickly composed herself and led them to a quiet table in the corner. Elon gestured for the man to sit. "Order whatever you like," he said, sliding the menu across the table. The man stared at the menu, his hands trembling slightly. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, as if unsure of what to say. Finally, he looked up at Elon. I don't even know your name." Elon smiled faintly. "Elon." The man nodded slowly. "Elon. I'm Jack." He paused, then added, You're really going to let me order anything?" "Anything," Elon confirmed. Jack's eyes flicked back to the menu, and for the first time, a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. He pointed to a steak dish, one of the more expensive items on the menu. "This one," he said, his voice gaining a bit of confidence. "And maybe a beer, if that's okay." Elon nodded to the waitress, who had been standing patiently nearby.
"One steak, medium rare, and a beer for my friend here."
"I'll have a coffee." As the waitress walked away, Jack leaned back in his chair, studying Elon with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "You're not like most people," he said finally. "Most folks just toss a few coins and keep walking. You actually stopped."
Elon shrugged.
"I've been fortunate in life. It's only right to share that fortune when I can." Jack chuckled softly, though there was no humor in it.
"Fortunate, huh?
Must be nice." Elon didn't respond immediately. He sipped his coffee, his expression thoughtful. "What's your story, Jack?" he asked after a moment. "How did you end up here?" Jack's smile faded, and he looked down at his hands, which were clasped tightly on the table. "It's a long story," he said quietly. "And not a very pretty one." Elon leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady.
"I've got time."
Jack hesitated, then sighed. "All right. But don't say I didn't warn you." And so, as the food arrived and the two men ate, Jack began to tell his story. He spoke of a life that had once been full of promise, a successful career, a loving family, a home in the suburbs. But then came the layoffs, the divorce, the downward spiral into debt and despair. He spoke of nights spent on park benches, of days spent scavenging for food, of the slow erosion of hope. Elon listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When Jack finished, there was a long pause. Then Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "You've been through a lot," he said finally. "But you're still here. That says something." Jack snorted. "Yeah, it says I'm too stubborn to give up." Elon smiled faintly. "Stubbornness can be a virtue." The two men sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the restaurant filling the space between them. Then Jack leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "You know," he said slowly, "I used to be like you. Successful. Confident. Thought I had it all figured out. But life has a way of humbling you, you know?" Elon nodded. "I do." Jack hesitated, then took a deep breath. "There's something I need to ask you," he said, his voice low. "And I know it's a lot, but—" Elon raised an eyebrow. "Go on." Jack met his gaze, his eyes steady.
"I need $100,000. Elon blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me."
Jack held up a hand.
"Hear me out.
"I'm not just asking for a handout. I've got a plan.
A way to turn my life around.
But I need capital to make it happen." Elon studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Jack, do you really think that's a reasonable request?" Jack's jaw tightened, and for a moment, it looked like he might argue. But then he sighed and looked away. "I guess not," he muttered. I thought maybe you'd understand." Elon's expression softened slightly.
"I do understand."
"But throwing money at a problem isn't always the solution." Jack nodded slowly, though his shoulders slumped in defeat.
"Yeah, I guess you're right."
The two men sat in silence for a while longer, the weight of the conversation hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Elon glanced at his watch and stood. "I have to go," he said. "But it was good talking to you, Jack." Jack looked up at him, his expression a mixture of gratitude and resignation. "Thanks for the meal," he said quietly. "And thanks for listening." Elon nodded, then turned and walked out of the restaurant, his security falling into step behind him. Jack watched him go, his mind racing with thoughts of what could have been, and what still might be. As Elon turned to leave, Jack's emotions boiled over. The gratitude he had felt moments ago was now overshadowed by a surge of frustration and anger. He shot up from his chair, the legs scraping loudly against the floor, drawing the attention of nearby diners. "Wait!" Jack called out, his voice louder than he intended. "You're just going to walk away? After everything I just told you?" Elon paused mid-step, his back still turned. He took a deep breath, then slowly turned to face Jack. His expression was calm, but there was a flicker of irritation in his eyes.
"I listened to you, Jack.
I bought you a meal.
What more do you want from me?"
Jack stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists at his sides.
"What do I want? I want a chance."
"You have no idea what it's like to lose everything, to have the world kick you when you're down. You sit there in your fancy clothes, sipping your coffee, acting like you're some kind of saint for buying me a steak. But when I ask for real help, you just—" He stopped himself, his voice cracking.
"You just walk away."
Elon's security team tensed, their hands hovering near their earpieces, ready to intervene if things escalated. But Elon raised a hand, signaling them to stand down. He took a step toward Jack, his voice low but firm. "You think I don't know what it's like to struggle? You think I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth? I've worked for everything I have. I've faced failure, rejection, and ridicule. But I didn't sit around waiting for someone to hand me a solution. I fought for it."
Jack let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, please. You're a billionaire. You don't know what it's like to be hungry, to be cold, to be invisible.
You don't know what it's like to have nothing and no one." Elon's jaw tightened, and for the first time, his calm demeanor wavered.
"You're right.
I don't know what that's like. But I do know what it's like to have a dream and to fight for it. And I'm telling you, Jack, throwing money at your problems won't solve them. You need to take responsibility for your life. Take responsibility." Jack shot back, his voice rising. "You think I haven't tried?
You think I want to be like this?"
I've done everything I can, but the system is rigged. People like you, you're the ones who rigged it." Elon's eyes narrowed.
"That's a convenient excuse. Blame the system, blame the world, blame everyone but yourself."
"But the truth is, Jack, you're the only one who can change your life." Jack's face flushed with anger. He took another step forward, his voice trembling with emotion.
"You don't get it. You'll never get it.
You're so far removed from reality, you can't even see how broken things are. You think you're helping by throwing a few crumbs my way, but you're just patting yourself on the back.
You're no better than anyone else."
Elon's patience was wearing thin.
"I'm not here to argue with you, Jack."
"I try to help, but if you're just going to lash out at me, then there's nothing more I can do." Jack's eyes burned with defiance. "Help? You call this help?
A meal and a lecture?
You could change my life with a fraction of what you spend in a day, but you won't.
Because deep down, you don't care.
You just want to feel good about yourself." Elon's voice grew colder.
"You're wrong.
I care about solving real problems. But I'm not going to enable someone who refuses to take responsibility for their own life." Jack's hands shook as he pointed a finger at Elon.
"You're a hypocrite.
You talk about changing the world, but when someone right in front of you needs help, you turn your back. What kind of hero does that make you?" Elon's security team moved closer, their presence a silent warning. But Elon held up a hand again, stopping them. He took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure.
"I'm not a hero, Jack.
I'm just a man trying to make a difference. But I can't help someone who doesn't want to help themselves." Jack's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, the fight seemed to drain out of him. But then he looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of desperation and defiance.
"You don't understand."
"You'll never understand." Elon sighed, his frustration giving way to a hint of sadness. "Maybe I don't. But I do know one thing, if you keep blaming the world for your problems, you'll never move forward."
"The choice is yours, Jack."
With that, Elon turned and walked away, his security team falling into step behind him. Jack stood there, watching him go, his chest heaving with emotion. The other diners had gone back to their meals, the brief disturbance already forgotten. But for Jack, the encounter had left a deep mark. He sank back into his chair, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to chase after Elon, to scream at him, to make him understand. But another part of him, a quieter, more rational part, knew that Elon was right. He couldn't keep blaming the world for his problems. He had to take responsibility for his own life. But how? That was the question that haunted him. How could he start over when he had nothing and no one? The weight of it all pressed down on him, and for the first time in a long time, he felt the sting of tears in his eyes. Jack sat in the restaurant for what felt like hours, though in reality, it was only a few minutes. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, frustration, shame, and, beneath it all, a glimmer of something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Elon's words had cut deep, but they had also sparked something inside him. He couldn't keep living like this, blaming the world for his problems. He had to take control of his life, no matter how impossible it seemed. As he sat there, staring at the half-eaten steak on his plate, he made a decision. He had to find Elon. He didn't know what he would say or do, but he knew he couldn't let things end like this. He stood up, his legs shaky but determined, and hurried out of the restaurant. The streets of Washington were still bustling with activity, the evening air crisp and cool. Jack scanned the crowd, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't have to look far. Elon and his security team were just a block away, walking at a brisk pace. Jack broke into a run, weaving through the crowd, his breath coming in short gasps. "Elon! Wait!" he called out, his voice hoarse. Elon stopped and turned, his expression a mixture of surprise and wariness. His security team immediately stepped in front of him, their hands raised to block Jack's approach. "Stay back," one of the guards said firmly. Jack skidded to a halt, his hands raised in a gesture of peace.
"Please, I just want to talk. I'm not here to cause trouble."
Elon studied him for a moment, then nodded to his security team. They stepped aside reluctantly, keeping a close eye on Jack as he approached.
"What is it, Jack?"
Elon asked, his tone cautious. Jack took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. I wanted to apologize. I was angry, and I said things I didn't mean."
"You were right."
"I've been blaming everyone else for my problems, but I'm the only one who can fix them." Elon's expression softened slightly. "It's not easy to admit that."
"It takes courage."
Jack nodded, his eyes downcast. "I don't know where to start, though. I've been stuck for so long, I don't even know how to move forward." Elon was silent for a moment, then he gestured to a nearby bench.
"Let's sit down."
The two men walked over to the bench, the security team keeping a respectful distance but still watching closely. They sat down, the tension between them slowly easing. "Tell me," Elon said, his voice calm and steady.
"What do you want?"
"Not just money, but what do you really want?" Jack hesitated, then sighed.
"I want my life back."
"I want to feel like I'm worth something again. I want to be able to look in the mirror and not hate what I see." Elon nodded. "That's a good start. But you need a plan. You can't just wish for things to change. You have to take action." "I know," Jack said quietly, "but I don't know where to begin." Elon leaned back, his gaze thoughtful.
"Start small.
Set a goal, something achievable. Then work toward it, one step at a time. It won't be easy, but nothing worth having ever is." Jack looked at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and desperation. "Will you help me?" Elon met his gaze, his expression unreadable. "I'll help you, but not in the way you're expecting. I'm not going to give you money. What I will give you is an opportunity." Jack's heart skipped a beat.
"What kind of opportunity?"
Elon reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Jack, who took it with trembling hands. "There's a program I fund. It's for people who want to turn their lives around. It provides training, resources, and support."
"If you're serious about changing your life, this is your chance."
Jack stared at the card, his mind racing.
I don't know what to say."
"Say you'll take it," Elon said simply. "But understand this, it's not a handout. You'll have to work hard. You'll have to prove yourself. And if you're not willing to do that, then this isn't for you." Jack looked up, his eyes filled with determination.
"I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes."
Elon nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Good. Then call the number on the card. They'll take care of the rest." Jack clutched the card tightly, as if it were a lifeline. "Thank you," he said, his voice choked with emotion.
"Thank you for giving me a chance."
Elon stood up, his expression serious but not unkind.
"Don't thank me yet.
The hard part is just beginning. But if you're willing to put in the effort, you might just surprise yourself." With that, Elon turned and walked away, his security team falling into step behind him. Jack watched him go, the weight of the moment settling over him. He felt a strange mix of emotions: fear, hope, determination. But most of all, he felt a sense of purpose, something he hadn't felt in years. He looked down at the card in his hand, the words Second Chance Initiative printed in bold letters. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a future. It wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to fight for it. As he sat there on the bench, the city bustling around him, Jack made a silent promise to himself. He would take this opportunity, and he would make the most of it. He would prove to himself, and to the world, that he was more than just a man who had fallen on hard times. He was someone who could rise again. And with that thought, Jack stood up, his resolve stronger than ever. He had a long road ahead of him, but for the first time in a long time, He felt like he was heading in the right direction.